Hey, folks. This is Jesse Cope back with another episode of the American Soul Podcast. Hope y'all are doing well, wherever y'all are, and whatever part of the day you're in. I sure do appreciate y'all joining me and giving me a little bit of your time and a little piece of your day. I will try and use it wisely. Hopefully, we'll get something out of it. Hopefully, we will draw a little bit closer to God and Jesus Christ and uh, draw our country a little closer to God and Jesus Christ. For those of y'all that continue to share the podcast and tell others about it, thank you so much. Very grateful for that. And for those of y'all who continue to pray for me on the podcast, thank you so much. Very grateful for that. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for you, Father, and your Son, Jesus Christ, and your Holy Spirit. Thank you for your love, mercy, grace, and forgiveness, for all the many blessings you bestow upon us as individuals and as a nation. Thank you for your word to read, that we have the ability to read it without fear of arrest, imprisonment, torture, murder. Be with those around the world who don't have that privilege, Father. Help us to remember them in our prayers. Help us to support them however we're able. Thank you for those who listen to the podcast. Be with them. Be with their families. Surround them with your angels. Protect them from evil of any kind. Guide their thoughts and their words and their actions. Help us, Lord, to do your will, to follow the commands of your Son, Jesus Christ, in all things. To love you with our whole heart, mind, soul, and strength. To love our neighbors as ourselves. Be with those, Father, who feel alone and rejected. Be with those who are sick and injured. Heal their bodies. Bring them comfort. Be with our leaders here in America and the countries around the world where people are listening. Help them to rule in fear of you, Father, to turn to you for wisdom and courage and guidance. Help us to get our priorities in the right order, Lord. Bless the marriages of those who are married and guide those who are seeking a spouse. Strengthen our families and be with those who are in harm's way, Father, on the border and our military and our law enforcement, our cities across the nation, our firefighters. Protect them and bring them home safe to their families and draw them close to you. In your Son's name we pray. Please guide my words here, Father. Amen. Have you made time for God today? I was scrolling every once in a while, not often, but every once in a while, I think that there are some really good uses for social media. I guess I shouldn't say not often. I just think you have to be really intentional about how you use social media, which is interesting because that was one of the clips that I saw was an old clip of Billy Graham talking about being intentional in prayer and how important it was to set aside a time each day to pray. And he said, you don't feel like praying? Pray. He said, but maybe especially when you don't feel like praying. And he said, you have, and he compared it to an interview with the president then, who I believe was Dwight Eisenhower. He said, if President Eisenhower called and said, hey, I've got a meeting tomorrow morning with you at 8 o'clock, and you woke up the next morning and you said, you know what, I don't really feel like going to that meeting. He said, that wouldn't be a very good excuse, would it? And he said, we have meeting each day and whenever we want with the God of the universe. And yet, how often do we put it aside because we don't feel like doing it? I saw another post talking about discipline and the time required to put in to become good at whatever we want. And it was an encouragement to keep putting in that time because at some point, someday, it would pay off. And I think the problem there is sometimes we have a vision of what that payoff is going to look like. And we don't worry about if our vision is lining up with God's. We just want his vision to line up with ours. Kind of reminds you of President Lincoln's quote about during the Civil War about always being concerned, not about being right, but being on God's side, or if God was on our side, but being very concerned with being on God's side because he knew God was always on the side of right. And then the last one that I saw, and I'll leave you alone and we'll move on, was a clip interview with Kobe Bryant. Not necessarily a huge fan of Kobe Bryant, but I do like a lot of the things that he says talking about discipline and work ethic. And he made the comment, he was being interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, in 2 years, he went from scoring 0 points in a game to being the best player in his entire state. And the interviewer goes, what did you do? How did that happen? And he said, it's just math. He said, I went out and he said, and I tell the kids that play for me this. At this point, he was coaching, I think, a team with his daughter on it, and tell their parents this. He said, you want to be a great player, you go out and play 2, 3 hours a day, play a game every day, all year long. He said, most kids are playing hour, hour and a half a week, twice, maybe twice a week at most. And he said it's just simple math. He said that's all it was. I was out there putting 2, 3 hours on a court every single day. And I've heard him talk about this before relative to if he was out there putting in X numbers of hours of work each day while his opponents were putting in a couple hours less each day, he was going to get better and better. And that gap was going to start to increase so much that it wasn't closable. What do we want to be great at? What do you want to be great at? Do you want to be great at whatever your job is? Do you want to be a great student? Do you want to be a great father, mother, great husband, a great wife, a great child to your parents, great basketball player, great podcaster, great reader? Are you putting in the time in order to be that? Particularly, folks, we hammer this every day. That's why I'm talking about it right now in this part of the podcast. Do you really want to be a great Christian, a great servant of God? And do you really want to be a great spouse? Are you intentionally putting that time in on the court every day, day after day, whether you feel like it or not? You see people that have a strong faith. You think that just happened by magic? And you can make all the comments you want in the world, which are true about God calling us to Him. But developing that faith, that skill, that relationship with God, are you putting in the time with Him? You want that great marriage that you see down the road in that other couple. Are you putting in the time with your spouse? to develop that relationship each day. So many of us, and I'm guilty of this too, folks, so many of us have what we consider a mediocre faith or a mediocre marriage. We would never admit that in public, but we just feel like we have an average, and what we really want is a phenomenal, but we don't want to put the time in. Proverbs 18 contrasts the upright and the wicked. He who separates himself seeks his own desire. He quarrels against all sound wisdom. A fool does not delight in understanding, but only in revealing his own mind. When a wicked man comes, contempt also comes, and with dishonor comes scorn. The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. To show partiality to the wicked is not good, nor to thrust aside the righteous in judgment. A fool's lips bring strife, and his mouth calls for blows. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are the snare of his soul. The words of a whisperer are like dainty morsels. They go down into the innermost parts of the body. He also, who is slack in his work, is brother to him who destroys. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runs to it and is safe. A rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own imagination. Before destruction, the heart of man is haughty, but humility goes before honor. He who gives an answer before he hears, it is folly and shame to him. The spirit of a man can endure his sickness, but as for a broken spirit, who can bear it? The mind of the prudent acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. The first to plead his case seems right until another comes and examines him. The cast lot puts an end to strife and decides between the mighty ones. A brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and contentions are like the bars of a citadel. With the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach will be satisfied. He will be satisfied with the product of his lips. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. The poor man utters supplications, but the rich man answers roughly. A man of too many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Verse 5, to show partiality to the wicked is not good, nor to thrust aside the righteous in judgment. There's so many of these in Proverbs that talk about honesty in judging. Doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, doesn't matter skin color, ethnicity, class, amount of, none of that matters. What matters is, did you do right or did you do wrong? That's the way a justice system should work. Sadly, ours in America and many around the world too often don't work like that. We condemn the innocent and we set free the guilty. And then we wonder why people don't have faith in our justice system. The same, folks, is true. Whatever your job is, profession, teacher, whether you're a leader in whatever company you work for, right? Are you honest across the board? Do you do what's right? Verse 10, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runs into it and is safe. How often I wait to turn to God until it's my last resort. I'm just, I've been doing this for quite a while, and still so often I turn to God as a last resort instead of a first option, the option. I wish that I could quote my father here better than I can. He made a comment a few days back about trying to understand that peace that God offered. And I'm paraphrasing horribly here, but basically, it's not the peace that comes with security in this world, financial, physical, whatever. It's the peace of knowing that eventually, in the end, you're going to end up with God in heaven for all eternity, and that He knows how you're going to get there. He knows the number of your days. He knows when the number of your days is up. He knows how it's going to be up. And it's not a matter of taking free will away, folks. It's not, it's just that He simply knows because He's outside of time and He can see all that and He knows it. And He's going to bring us home to Him despite all of our idiotic choices. You go back to that quote from Stonewall Jackson so often, talking about men would be equally brave if they trusted equally in God, right? And knew that God knew. You know, they asked him, why, how are you so brave? And he said, well, God knows my time. He already knows. He knows when I'm going to die. He knows how. It's just my job to act, which reminds me of John Quincy Adams. Duty is ours. Results are God's. Run to God. Verse 14, the spirit of man can endure his sickness, but as for a broken spirit, who can bear it? How do you develop a resilient spirit, folks? Everybody knows that trial is going to come in this life. Even young kids realize that there's heartache and trial in this life. So how do we develop a resilient spirit? If you want to be in better shape, what do? Work out. If you want a healthier body, what do? Eat better. If you want a stronger marriage, what do? You focus on your spouse. If you want to be a better basketball player, what do? You spend time on the court. If you want a more resilient spirit, what do? We spend time with the creator of our souls, who also happens to be the creator of our bodies, God. Verse 21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Just simply, folks, the amount of power that our tongue has, that our words have. Actions always speak louder than words, but often words outline actions. You can show people your actions as you're talking, the way you deliver something. Are you sarcastic all the time? Are you cutting? Are you cruel? Are you rude? Are you kind? Are you patient? Are you understanding? Verse 24, a man of too many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. I think one of the things, it's what struck me this morning is the number of quote unquote friends, followers, whatever you want to call it, that we think we have online. As if you can really develop that many close friends. I think that's one of the great damages that social media has done, particularly to kids, but even to us as adults, has convinced us that we can have all of these friends. And I go back to my grandmother's quote, if you have one really, truly bloodthirsty friend in your life, you should consider yourself blessed. If you have two, it's almost unheard of. And so this idea that you can have this huge group of really great friends, folks. It doesn't even make sense from a logical point of view, because if you really want a great friendship, what do you have to do? You have to spend time. You have to develop that relationship. Just like we talk about every day on the podcast with God and your spouse. Well, you only have so much time. It reminds me of one of our favorite movies at Christmas, which I'm already ready for Christmas again. Uh, One of our favorite movies of all time is White Christmas. And there's a scene in at the beginning of the movie where the two main characters are going back and forth. And one of them, they're in show business, right? And one of them is just, he's worn out. He's had all they can take. They've been going constantly. They've been on the road constantly. Every night it's another show. And his partner's just pushing him, pushing him, pushing him. And he finally goes, his partner finally, what's wrong? What's the matter? And he goes, you really want to know? And yeah, I really want to know. And he goes, I'm worn out. I'm exhausted. You're crazy. And the guy was like, whoa, what do you want me to do about it? He said, I want you to get married. I want you to have 9 kids. And if you only spend 5 minutes a day with each kid, that'll give me 45 minutes of rest where I can go out and do something on my own. And of course, 5 minutes a day with your kids probably ain't going to cut it. But you get the idea. It's time, folks. It's time. All right. So, Jonathan Edwards, a couple quotes by him today. One, he was talking about Song of Solomon or Song of Songs. It's a book in the Bible that I don't think gets enough attention. I've certainly rarely heard sermons out of this particular book over the course of my life, which is interesting because it's talking about the relationship between a husband and wife, marriage between lovers, and between which illustrates the relationship again between Christ and the church, right? That's a pretty big deal. That's kind of one of the central parts of our faith, and yet we don't talk about this book very often, and I think it's because it makes a lot of people really uncomfortable. Um, and this will probably make a lot of y'all uncomfortable, but you're talking to your kid about marriage, and so often, at least inside the church, at least traditionally, I'm not sure that this really happens today so much. We talk to kids about not being intimate outside of marriage, not having sex outside of marriage, which is great. But we never stop to talk to them about doing that in marriage, about the need for that physical intimacy in marriage and how important that is once you get married. We make it a really bad thing outside of marriage, which we should, but we don't make it a really good thing inside of marriage. There's a disconnect there. We don't explain that to our children. And so it's no wonder we have so many hangups and problems there. But this is Jonathan Edwards. If you're not familiar with Edwards, let me see if I can find a little blip about him out of our American God and Country Encyclopedia of Quotes. That's one of the great things about this America's God and Country Encyclopedia of Quotations by Federa is they have little brief biographies on all these people. Jonathan Edwards, third president of Princeton University, which was formerly called the College of New Jersey, one of our great leaders of faith. Really, his preaching is credited with starting the first great awakening, and kind of helped pull them together. Not kind of did. That was what really united the colonies prior to the Revolutionary War. Married Sarah Pierrepont, if I said that right, in 1727. They had 11 children, and they agreed to raise them in respect of God. There was a study done in 1900. I think this is fascinating, showing their descendants, right? 13 college presidents, 65 professors, 30 judges, 100 lawyers, a dean of a prestigious law school, 80 public office holders, 100 missionaries, 3 mayors of large cities, 3 governors, 3 United States senators, 1 comptroller of the United States Treasury, and 1 vice president of the United States. So, and his quote on Song of Solomon was a song of the most excellent subject, treating of the love, union, and communion between Christ and his spouse, of which marriage and conjugal love was but a shadow. These are the most excellent lovers, and their love the most excellent love. You know, you're really looking for something to improve your marriage. Praying together, reading the Bible together. This might be a pretty good place to start. It might be a good place to be if you're preparing for marriage, if you're going through marriage counseling, to read Song of Solomon. But I just, again, that relationship, right? You hear him talking about that love, union, and communion between Christ and his spouse. That's what we're supposed to resemble in a marriage, right? Between husband and wife. We're supposed to resemble that relationship between Christ and the church. Do we? There's a little quote I saw the other day about marriage. Your kids are either going to want to mimic your marriage, they're going to want to have the same kind of marriage you do, or they're not. So, one of the most famous sermons that Edwards gave was July 8th, 1741. And the title of the sermon, and we really ought to read this in full, maybe we will sometime, is Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And it was based on, if I can find this real quick, Deuteronomy 32. Oops, it went away. 32, 35. Deuteronomy 32. I'm getting there. 35. Vengeance is mine, and retribution. In due time their foot will slip, for the day of their calamity is near, and the impending things are hastening upon them. You can see why he gave this speech, and people were just astounded. Uh, it's described, the way it's described is just almost a physical force that came into the building. And the people were crying and moaning and clutching to the pews in the building as if they were afraid that at that very moment the floor was going to give way and they were going to descend into hell. Because a perfect God, a just God, has no room for evil men and women, which we all are, for sinners. The only way that we get to come to him is because the blood that Jesus Christ shed, his life, his sacrifice, covers all of those sins. And that's what he was trying to get to people. And so he's given this sermon, and this is a little part of it. Unconverted men walk over the pit of hell on a rotten covering. And there are innumerable places in this covering so weak that they will not bear their weight. And these places are not seen. The arrows of death fly unseen at noonday. The sharpest sight cannot discern them. This that you have heard is the case of every one of you that are out of Christ. That world of misery, that lake of burning brimstone is extended abroad under you. There is a dreadful pit of the glowing flames of the wrath of God. There is hell's wide gaping mouth open, and you have nothing to stand upon, nor anything to take hold of. There is nothing between you and hell but the air. Your wickedness makes you as it were, heavy as lead, and to tend downwards with great weight and pressure towards hell. And if God should let you go, you would immediately sink and swiftly descend and plunge into the bottomless gulf, and your healthy constitution and your own care and prudence and best contrivance and all your righteousness would have no more influence to uphold you and keep you out of hell than a spider's web would have to stop a falling rock. And now you have an extraordinary opportunity, a day wherein Christ has thrown the door of mercy wide open and stands in calling and crying with a loud voice to poor sinners. Don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. Don't put off turning to Christ one more day, not even one more. You have no idea what's coming tomorrow. You have no idea when your last day will be. And if you don't have Christ, there won't be anything standing between you and that plunge into that bottomless gulf of flaming hell. And if you do have Christ, take peace from knowing that He has you, that you can never fall into that abyss, and help lead others to that same peace and comfort. Remember, because this is a podcast based on the American soul, that this was from a preacher who led the first Great Awakening, which unified the colonies and prepared them to survive the Revolutionary War. Remember how many of these people listened to sermons multiple times a week. You go back to what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. How much time are we giving to the things that are truly important? God bless y'all. God bless your families. God bless your marriages. God bless America. God bless your nation, wherever you are around the world listening. We'll talk to y'all again real soon, folks. Looking forward to it.